smelled bleach before I heard my daughter's name. Hospitals try to smell like nothing, but bleach always tells the truth. It sits in the air the way a bad idea sits in a room, loud even when nobody is talking. I had my palm flat on the check-in counter at Chatham Memorial, feeling the cool laminate through my skin like I could speak to the building if I pushed hard enough. A man behind the glass said, "Family consent is documented." His voice bounced off the glass like it had nowhere else to land. "I'm the family," I said. "Show me where I signed." The nurse in the bay behind him didn't look up. The interpreter's badge chimed green at a door and then red again, quick as a heartbeat. The clock over Bay 4 said 2:17 p.m. The clock above my stove at home said 2:12 at that same moment because I hadn't had the heart to set it right since my husband died 3 years ago and took the habit of winding it with him. That's how I knew their time was wrong. That's how I knew somebody had moved the hands. "Ma'am," the man behind the glass said, aiming for calm like he practiced it, "your daughter's scheduled for a short sedation while we do a preliminary endoscopic exam. It's routine." "Nothing about the word sedation is routine to me," I said, "and you didn't get my signature." He adjusted the angle of the clipboard, straightened papers that weren't crooked, and said he'd call patient relations. He did not meet my eyes. I could see his reflection in the glass, a man who learned to survive by living behind it. "Call whoever you want," I said. "I'll wait right here." I didn't sit. I stood there in my good church cardigan, the blue one that holds its shape no matter how hard the day pulls at it. I was 68 years old and my knees were reminders, but they were not in charge. From Bay 4, I could see my girl, just a slice of her, Maren's elbow with the soft freckles she got from her daddy, the tendons in her hand thin as pencil lines. She was laughing at something the nurse said because that's who she is, the kind who smiles to make other people less afraid. The interpreter stepped back through the door and glanced at the clock like it owed her money. She wore her hair in a neat bun that didn't move when her head did, and her shoes squeaked once on the waxed floor. When her eyes met mine, she didn't pretend not to see me. It was the smallest thing, and I remember it because so many people will walk right past a mother on a day like this and pretend the mother is a coat rack. "Miss Carter?" a woman in a blazer said behind me. Patient relations came in a navy suit and an apology smile. "Let's talk in my office. You can bring the paper, the one with my name on it." Her smile did not crack the way I wanted it to. "Of course." In the small office, I sat across from a plant that had given up last spring and was still here out of courtesy. The woman laid a form on the desk and spun it for me like a magician with a card trick. "We have your daughter's advance directive and an addendum for procedural sedation signed by you as next of kin." She had the tone of someone who had to explain to a lot of people that they were wrong. I leaned forward, took my readers out, and looked at the signature. The O in Eloise had a loop on the top I never make. The middle initial was wrong. Someone had written an M where there should have been an R. I don't have a middle name. My mother believed if you give a child too many names, they'll forget the one they were born with. "That's not my hand," I said. "Sometimes when people sign on a tablet, that's not my hand," I said again, because sometimes you have to step clean over a person's gentle voice to make room for the truth. She exhaled and sat back like I'd slapped the air. "We're not here to force anything. The physician believes this will help your daughter. We're trying to expedite. You're trying to soften the words so they don't bruise. Expedite is when you order a part for a dishwasher. My daughter is not a Maytag." She swallowed. "I understand." That was a lie, but a soft one. She did not ask me to prove my signature. She did not say this happens or this doesn't happen. She said she would place a hold, which is what people call it when they pull the brake but can't promise the wheels will listen. I walked back to Bay 4. Maren's fiance wasn't there yet. He texted me he was wrapping a thing at the office. meaning he was in a room with men who clapped for each other and never seemed to hear when women spoke in hallways. I could see the top of my girl's head now. Her hair was pulled back into a messy knot that made her look 13 again and late for homeroom. I made the shape of her face in my mind and put it next to the baby she had been, the one who used to sleep with her hands above her head like she was surrendering to a quiet dream. "Miss Carter?" The interpreter approached me without making me move first. "I'm Rosa. I was asked to interpret for the consent conversation." She lowered her voice like we were already a team and the room didn't need to know about it. "Your daughter doesn't need interpretation. I understand that. The boyfriend's grandmother asked for it. She speaks Spanish." "Nate's grandmother?" I said. His family was the kind of Southern that said grandmother instead of grandma, like the word had pearls on it. Rosa nodded. "I just want to be clear. The wording I interpreted for the grandmother describes supportive measures only while we wait for additional test results. No sedation. But the English form says pre-procedural sedation. That's not the same concept." "Time?" I asked. She glanced at her badge. "I clocked into Bay 4 at 2:06, out at 2:11. "Who told you 2:17? "The clock told me 2:17, I said. Then I took a breath and did not say that the clock at home was wrong too, because that's a detail people like to argue with when they are scared. "Rosa, do you have a break in 15? She looked over her shoulder like a guilty blessing might be hiding there. "Yes. "I'll find you at the volunteer lounge," I said. "Right now I need to make a phone call I hoped I would never make again." I took the old recipe card out of my wallet. The ink was faded to a brown that remembers being black, and the edges had that smooth feel paper gets when it's been carried longer than any purse. The number on it was in my husband's hand. He had written it the year before he died, after a deputy at the courthouse told him quietly that if we ever ran into trouble of the clerical kind, there was a man you could call who knew how paper told stories. I'd called it once, 2 summers ago, when a developer tried to move a zoning notice to a post nobody watched. The voice on the other end had said, "I'm retired from the city, Miss Carter, but I'm not retired from the truth." I stepped into the alcove by the vending machines, where the soda buttons glow like cheap Christmas and the ice machine coughs like an old man. I dialed with my thumb, and each tone felt like a small metal tap on a door. "Pierce," the voice said, and it sounded like he'd been expecting bad news so long that when it finally arrived, he greeted it by name. "It's Eloise," I said. "It's time." There was the briefest pause, the sound of someone looking out a window to see if the rain they'd smelled finally started. "Bring carbon originals if you can," he said, "not copies, and don't let anybody take pictures of them under fluorescent lights. The shine lies." "I don't have originals," I said. "They have a tablet." "You have eyes," he said. "Use those. Meet me at my place in an hour. The address is the back of your card." "It feels like picking up a weapon," I said. "Good," he said. "You'll hold it careful." I hung up, and it felt like pulling a fire alarm in my chest. Nate texted me, "Traffic, be there in 20. Don't let them scare you. I got this." I didn't answer. People who say "I got this" when the "this" is not their body and not their daughter's breath don't know the shape of the thing they're holding. I leaned in at Boy 4. "Hey, baby." She turned her head. There was a receiver in her eyes, an open channel. "Hi, Mama," she said. "I'm okay, I promise." "I will be," I said. "They say it's not even a big sedation," she said, "just to make it easier." "They say a lot of things when they want you to do something," I said. "I told patient relations to hold. I need to look at a document with your name on it and a lie." She swallowed, looked at her hands. "I can sign for myself." "You can," I said, "and yet they didn't think to ask you first?" She closed her eyes for a second, like she was practicing being inside her head instead of in this room. Nate's grandma was worried, she said. Nate's grandma has a name, I said, and when she didn't supply it, I did. Victoria. She has a monogram on everything she touches. I know, Marin said, and the corner of her mouth twitched because she knew my tone when I was tired of polite people all dressed up like kindness. She means well. I don't care how she means, I said. I care what the paper says. Okay, Mama, she said. In that way, grown children talk to their mothers when they love them deeply and disagree quietly. Do what you need to do. I kissed her forehead. Her skin was cool. Her hair smelled like the shampoo that costs more than I think shampoo should cost, and I was glad she bought it anyway. On my way out, at the end of the hall, I passed Victoria Burton. She wore a linen jacket the color of a fog bank and pearls like small moons. Beside her was a man from church who uses the word ministry the way some men use mercy. He saw me and reached to touch my elbow. Victoria gave me the social smile, the one that says, we exist together in the same town and therefore share a weather. Aloes, she said, voice buttered. Such a worry for everyone. We are praying. I said, you can pray and also step aside. Those two things don't offend each other. The man from church pivoted into a sermon about faith and doctors and God's hands guiding. I raised a finger without breaking eye contact with Victoria. God's hands don't forge signatures, I said. For the first time since I'd known her, something uncombed passed across Victoria's face. It was gone in a blink. But I saw the monogrammed pen in her left hand, VMB, in gold filigree near the clip. She never went anywhere without it. When the ladies at the garden club had told me that pen was a gift from a board she chairs, I imagined it wrote checks that carried more about the ink than the line items. She said, have a blessed afternoon. There was a hairline crack in the blessing. I said, be careful what you bless, and walked out into the heat that rises off hospital parking lots in late summer like a ghost. Savannah in August moves slow, but trouble doesn't. The live oaks lean over the streets like they're in on secrets. I drove my old Corolla to a quiet block where the paint holds to the siding because the houses refuse to admit they are tired. Mr. Pierce's building smelled like paperbacks and dust and onions from someone's kitchen, and it made me want to sit on a couch and read whatever life had left behind. He opened his door before I knocked. He was older than I remembered, or maybe I was seeing him in a different light. He had the look of a man who had spent his days in rooms where the lights stay on, even when nobody's there. He said, "You brought your eyes. Good. Come in." His living room was lined with steel shelves filled with cardboard banker's boxes labeled in a tidy hand, notary samples, stamp evolution, city seal changes 1978 to 2003, EHR audit tips. There was a folding table under the window with a green felt mat and a little gooseneck lamp that made a circle of honesty on the surface. "I only have what they showed me on a screen," I said. "I took pictures with my mind, not my phone." "That's better," he said. "Phones make people braver than they're ready to be." He had me set and brought out a tray with a glass of water, sweating like it was nervous. "Tell me what you saw." I described the signature, the loop on the O, the wrong middle initial, the way the line dragged on the downstroke like the pen didn't want to go where the hand pushed it. I described the timestamps, the interpreter badging in at 2:06, out at 2:11, the wall clock saying 2:17, patient relations acting like numbers were weather. I described the monogram to pen. "Tell me how they said they got your signature," he said. "On a tablet," I said. "They always say tablet like that makes it holy."
He smiled like a tired teacher with a favorite student. A tablet is just a paper that lights up, he said. You'd be amazed how many clerks think the light makes it legal. He brought out an old notary stamp book and flipped to a page with photos of seals. If they claim a notarized signature, ask for the notary's log, he said. If there's no log, it's noise. He slid me a sheet with magnified images of ballpoint versus gel versus rollerball. You remember that monogrammed pen? If you saw the nib, you saw the ink, even if you think you didn't. Rollerball bleeds at a corner. Gel pools at a stop. Ballpoint skips like a bad record. I don't know if I saw it, I said. You saw it, he said. You are not a woman who misses what matters. He spread out a drawn diagram of Chatham Memorial's admitting office he'd done from memory, like a magician drawing a dove. Here's what else, he said. The system uses generic credentials for certain after-hours chart edits. They do that to speed, but it makes mischief easy. If you can get someone inside to check the audit trail, look for edits from a generic ID outside normal shift blocks. Like 2:17 when the interpreter left at 2:11, I said.
Exactly, he said. Someone wants the time to float. Why, I asked, why not just ask my daughter? She can sign her own body. He sat back and did not rush the answer. Because it isn't about your daughter, he said. It's about a model. Some people get rich not from the big crimes, but from 100 little papers lined up in a row. Guardianship petitions, advance directives, medical holds, hospice rolls. Each one looks like a different weather report. Put them together and you get a storm that always rains in the same yard. You're saying the Burtons? I'm not saying names, he said. I'm saying systems. But systems are built by someone. And from what you told me about that monogram pen, somebody wants to sign for the sky. I was quiet long enough to hear my heart settle into the chair. What do I do first? I asked. You already did it, he said. You stopped the part where they put medicine in your baby before they put truth in the file. Next, you need an inside witness who will not faint when the hallway gets loud. I thought of Rosa, the interpreter who saw me. I know who, I said. Bring me a photo of any paper with a seal or a stamp, he said, not to keep, to look, and ask for the notary's commission number. If it's wrong, I'll feel it before we find it. As I stood to go, he took a small envelope from a drawer and handed it to me. Inside was a square of old cloth with a pattern of tiny green checks. What is this? I asked. Lens cloth from an old camera, he said. Paper shines different when it's scared. Wipe the glare, make the truth matte. I put the cloth in my purse like you put hope in a pocket, carefully so it doesn't slip out when you're not paying attention. At the hospital again, I found Rosa in the volunteer lounge where the donated puzzle of a lighthouse was perpetually missing the same 3 sky pieces. She looked up when I came in. She had a peanut butter sandwich in a bag from home and a way of sitting that took up no more space than it needed. I can get you exactly 5 minutes with the unit clerk. She's friendly, but she doesn't know yet how much trouble that is. She slid a sticky note toward me with a name and an extension. Also, I checked the interpreter portal. The session for Bay 4 is recorded as advice only, no consent. If they changed the chart, it happened after I left. Thank you, I said. I meant it in a way that felt like holding water in my hands and being careful not to spill. The unit clerk had a heart necklace and a smile for everybody. She printed what she called the paper trail and handed it to me because Rosa asked, and because nobody had yet told her that paper trails turn into shoes when they walk away from the desk. I didn't photograph them under the fluorescent lights. I walked to the window of the stairwell, where the light came in soft through glass that made the outside look like a painting. I used Pierce's cloth because I like to do what men with gentle voices tell me when they are right. I looked at the notary seal on the sedation addendum.
The commission number was at the bottom, proper as a shoe. I wrote it down. I looked at the date. It was stamped July 3, the seal expiring in June next year. I lifted the page and the stamp shone just a little too proud. Not impressed into the paper, not quite, more like it wrote on top. I looked at the signature again, the O-loop, the wrong initial, the downstroke drag, and I saw the ink, rollerball, gel. I didn't know the name, but I saw the way it fattened where the line stopped at the end of the E, like the pen took a breath.
"Rosa," I said when I found her again, "do you know a notary named—" I gave her the name on the stamp. She frowned, thinking, "That's Victoria's assistant. She notarizes everything for the Burtons. She comes to health fair events with a clipboard and free pens." "Monogrammed?" I asked because it made me cruelly happy to get to ask a detail. Rosa laughed a little like a cough. "No," she said, "but she carries extras in a cup like candy." "Baby," I said to my daughter when I went back to Bay 4, "we're going to sit tight and drink water and remember how to breathe. You will not sign anything today without me reading it slow enough to put a clock to shame." "Okay," she said, softer now. "I'm tired, Mama." "I know," I said, and smoothed her hair even though she'd spent years telling me she was too old for that. At 6:10 p.m., Nate arrived like a weak storm. The scent of expensive cologne and a restless boyhood hit the curtain a second before he did. He kissed the top of Marin's head and gave me the kind of hug a man gives a woman he wants to impress and cannot. His suit jacket was too tight across the shoulders because ambition will make a man buy a size smaller and talk himself into it. "Hey, Louise," he said. "It's handled." "No," I said. "It's paused." He sighed in a way he hoped sounded patient. "There's a lot of moving parts here," he said. "My grandma is just trying to—" "Your grandma is a grown woman with a pen and a plan," I said. "And your family signed me where God didn't. That's a felony and a sin." His jaw did a small work. I saw a thought short circuit and restart. "People make mistakes," he said. "The mistake wasn't the signature," I said. "It was thinking I'd fall for it." He looked down at Marin. "Babe, I swear, this is a misunderstanding," he said. Marin watched his mouth like it was talking through glass. "I don't want to be medicated for a misunderstanding," she said. He spread his hands like a man explaining a budget. "We're going to take good care of you," he said. "We will," I said. "You go get some sleep." He left with a promise to call his father. He said it like a firefighter saying he'd get the hose, like the water already belonged to him. That night, while Marin dozed and the machines made their own small songs, I sat in the lobby near the aquarium where the fish looked too tired to fight the filter. I dialed Mr. Pierce and gave him the notary commission number. He hummed on the other end. "I know that name," he said. "I'll pull the log." "Also," I said, "Rosa says the interpreter session was advice only, no consent. The chart changed after she left." "Then your villain is either sloppy or proud," he said. "Both are useful." At 8:41, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. It was a photo of a bouquet of white hydrangeas in a hospital room that wasn't ours. The message said, "We're all on the same side here. Let's not make a scene." It had no name attached, but tone has a signature too. I stared at the picture until the hydrangeas blurred into a leak of white. I deleted the message. I closed my eyes. I imagined my husband's hands cutting a peach over the sink, the way he did it like it was a skill. I heard him say, "You don't have to be the loudest person in the room to be the one holding the hammer." In the morning, Rosa brought me coffee too sweet to be anything but kindness, and Mr. Pierce called to say the notary's commission began October 1 of last year, which means any stamp claiming July is pretending, he said. "Show me how to say that in a way a room can't wriggle out of," I said. "You don't have to,"
he said. Write the number down, bring it to the right ears. The dates will accuse without your voice having to rise. The right ears? I asked. The county health board meets Friday. Emergency agenda slots exist for people who know how to ask. The deputy health officer is straight as drywall. You put the wrong date in front of her, and you'll see what steel looks like before it gets made into a bridge.
Her name? I asked. Klein, he said. Noelle. She does not laugh at the right people's jokes, which is why she still sleeps at night. I dialed the number for the board office and did what women like me have to learn to do early. Sound like a person who expects the door to open. I need to request an emergency slot for public comment. I have evidence of a forged notary stamp attached to a medical directive and a potential misuse of interpreter services that changes patient care. The receptionist asked questions I had answers ready for, and then said, almost surprised, "Okay, Thursday, 3:10 p.m., 5 minutes. 5 minutes will be enough to light the fuse," I said. "Ma'am," she said. "Nothing," I said. "Just put me down." I hung up and felt the kind of calm that comes not from peace, but from having a place to stand to lift a lever. The next 2 days were a quiet war. The Burtons set out to make me the problem before I could make them the problem. It's a tactic older than paper. The pastor called to say he was concerned about my tone. A mutual friend said I should think about Marion's future, as if I was planning to turn the clock back to yesterday at noon and pretend this afternoon hadn't happened. My landlord left a note about noise complaints, even though I wasn't home. A deacon's wife, soft-spoken and bright-eyed, stopped me outside the grocery and said, maybe I was tired and it was okay to let other people carry some weight. People like to wrap instructions around you like a blanket and call it comfort when what they mean is hush. I ran errands with my phone on in case Marin or Rosa needed me. I slept in the chair by the hospital window with one shoe off and the other on, like a person who wants to be comfortable and ready to run at the same time. I wrote down details on the back of a grocery list, timestamps, names, door chimes, badge reads, the way Victoria's pen glinted under the fluorescent lights when she signed her name for the chaplain to see it. Mr. Pierce sent me an image from an old city archive, a scan of notary seal changes over the years. He wrote, "Notice how the border shifts from rope to laurel. Your July stamp shows the laurel before it existed." And then below it, he wrote, "This is the kind of mistake people make when they think paper is a stage prop." Rosa texted me a photo of her interpreter portal with the session code for Bay 4, a string of numbers that looked like nothing until you needed to show someone that numbers can have a conscience. She also sent me a voice note, a snippet of a voicemail from a verification officer who had called her Sunday to ask for confirmation. "This is Danielle from Veritas Verification, just making sure the patient's family signed off." Rosa had Googled the number. It went to the HR desk at Burton Home Care, the hospice arm. She hadn't called back. "How are you doing?" I asked her in the women's room when we both found ourselves there and grateful for a place with a lock. She said, "I like my job. I like it because I get to be a pair of ears that make sure what's said is what's heard. This week, I feel like a wall with a coat of paint on it." "You're more than paint," I said. She looked at me like nobody had said that to her out loud this week. "I'll be at the hearing," she said. "If they let me through the door, I'll be there." On Thursday, the air felt like it weighed more than usual. The boardroom at the county building had chairs that looked like they were designed to keep people from getting too comfortable with power. Dr. Klein sat on the dais in a plain blazer, hair pulled back with a rubber band she probably took from a file folder. Her eyes were the kind I trust, interested, not eager. I waited my turn while men with neckties talked about sewage permits and mosquitoes. When she called my name, I stood up and felt every year of my life like a blessing on my shoulders, and I let it make me taller. "Good afternoon," I said. "My name is Eloise Carter. My daughter's name is Marin.
She is 28 and working to become a nurse, which means she believes in the idea that care is not just a word you write next to a number. I told them what happened in Bay 4 in a voice that did not ask permission. I laid out the timestamps like stepping stones. 2:06 in, 2:11 out, 2:17 on the wall clock like a shrug. I read the notary commission number into the record and then the commission date. Yet the stamp on the sedation addendum reads July, I said. I am not a lawyer, but I read the law as a citizen every day. July is not October. A commission that hasn't begun cannot testify to something's truth. It can only testify to the speed with which someone would like to get away with it. A man in the back coughed the way people cough when they want to say liar without moving their mouth. I did not turn. Additionally, I said, the interpreter session recorded from my daughter's case states advice only, no consent. The English document in the chart says pre-procedural sedation. Those are not synonyms. If someone changed the chart after the interpreter left, then words are being moved like furniture in an empty house.
Dr. Klein held out a hand. Miss Carter, she said, do you have those documents to submit to the clerk? I do, I said. I slid copies across the table, printouts from Rosa's portal and the hospital's patient access screen that the clerk had printed before someone higher up remembered to tell her not to. On the sedation addendum, I circled the notary number and the date. On the interpreter log, I highlighted the in and out times. Dr. Klein looked at the papers for a long second. Then she looked at me the way a person looks at a map when they have decided to get where they're going. Thank you, she said. A lawyer from the back stood up and tried to smile and failed. If I may, he said, this is a misunderstanding best resolved internally. The family is very supportive of our county's health efforts. Sir, Dr. Klein said, and the sir landed like a ruler on a desk in third grade, you are out of order. He sat down with a thump, and it made me believe in order again for one breath. I move that we refer this immediately to the district attorney's office for review of potential fraud and to the state licensing board for emergency suspension of any entity implicated pending investigation, one of the board members said. I did not know her name, but I will make her a pie if I ever do. Second, said a man who looked like he rarely went second. All in favor? Dr. Klein said. The votes were hands in the air that looked, for once, like what they were. People willing to be seen doing the right thing. After, in the hall, Victoria was waiting with a face like carved ivory that is about to remember it used to be a piano key. She lifted her chin at me. Was that satisfying? She asked.
No, I said. Satisfying is my daughter breathing without anybody thinking they own that breath. What happened in there was necessary. She held up her pen, the monogram catching the fluorescent light. You don't know where your daughter would be without us, she said. I do, I said. Right here, with me. She smiled without showing her teeth. You'll regret this. I regret only that I didn't look close sooner, I said. Love made me polite. That's a mistake I can correct. For a moment, I thought she might slap me, but she was a woman who had spent her life being thanked for showing up, and hands like that forget they have other uses. The DA's investigator took my statement in a small room that smelled like copy paper and coffee. He asked questions carefully, like he walked around them first. He took Rosa's recording of the voicemail, and when he heard the woman say Veritas Verification in a voice that belonged to Burton HR, he raised his eyebrows just enough to count as an emotion. He said, "We'll need the hospital's audit log for the chart." Dr. Klein met his eyes. "You'll have it by the end of day," she said. I drove back to the hospital and sat with Marin while the light changed color on the windowsill. She drifted in and out the way you do when your body is tired of arguing. At 7, a nurse named Thomas, who had the gentlest hands, drew her blood and called her baby without making it small. At 8, the doctor came and said words like observation and conservative management, and we would not recommend sedation at this time. And I watched his mouth move around those words like he had come to them all by himself. At 9, Nate came in with a bouquet that I could smell from the hall and a face that had practiced contrition in the car. He got down on one knee like we were at a party and said, "I'm sorry, this is on me. I told them to speed things up and that was a mistake." He looked at me. "Eloise, I wasn't trying to hurt anyone." "Then who were you trying to help?" I asked. He swallowed. "My grandma's been under a lot of pressure," he said. "There are regulatory—" "Stop!" Marin said, and her voice had a center I hadn't heard since she was 8 and told a boy at school to stop pulling the class gerbil's tail. He sat back like a long string someone had wound too tight finally gave. For a second, I saw the boy he had been in a backyard somewhere with a slingshot and a father who clapped too loud for hits that weren't fair. I didn't feel sorry for him exactly, but I did understand the size of the hole in his map.
"It can be fixed," he said. "It is being fixed," I said. "You're late to the job." He looked at Marin. "Do you still want—" He stopped. The sentence had dared him to finish it, and he didn't. "I don't know what I want with us," she said. "I know what I want for me." He nodded, stood, and left the flowers like they were a fee. I took them downstairs and gave them to the woman at the information desk. She smiled like I had handed her something cheap and beautiful, which I had. In the days that followed, the town did what towns do when something breaks that everybody thought was furniture. People picked it up and stared at the bottom to see what held it together. The hospice arm of the Burton Empire announced they were cooperating fully, which is how people say when they want to sound helpful while practicing how to be quiet. The notary whose seal had done too much resigned. The hospital went suddenly slow on any paperwork that featured a Burton family member within shouting distance, which made me believe in learning. Mr. Pierce called me on Saturday morning. "You'll see heat that looks like light now," he said. "They'll try to blind you with brightness. Stay in the shade." "How?" I asked. "Find a quiet task," he said. "Do it until your hands remember the name of the day." I went to the hospital library on the ground floor, the one nobody visits unless they're lost. I straightened the shelves. I returned books to where they belonged alphabetically because order is a small god and I could worship it without shame. I made a pile for loose magazines and a pile for pamphlets with dates older than dignity. I used the cloth he'd given me to wipe fingerprints off the glass frames of medical certificates that had been hung crooked since 2011. While I worked, my mind didn't empty so much as steady. Sometimes steady is better than empty. When I finished, I sat in a chair and listened to the sound of the children's section across the hall, where someone laughed because they solved the puzzle that always misses the sky. My phone buzzed. It was Dr. Klein. "We've issued an emergency suspension for Burton Home Care pending investigation," she said. "The DA has a warrant for specific records. We'll see how long it takes the gears to catch." I said, "Thank you for believing paper can be a witness." "Paper tells the truth when people won't," she said. "That's why liars love software without logs." "I'll bake you a cake," I said. "I don't eat cake," she said, "but I bake bread. Bring me yeast and we'll call it even." That afternoon, Marin was moved from observation to a regular room with a window that looked out on a magnolia tree, doing its best in bad soil. She sat up without the cords of machines anchoring her, ate a cup of pudding like it had done something to her, and slept for 3 hours with her mouth open, the way she did when she was 6 and had run all day. After a week, she came home with me.
Not to the old apartment I'd had for 20 years, the one with the landlord who had suddenly developed new rules about visitors and noise. We packed her things in silence while the air unit rattled against summer. She cried once, sharp and quiet, at a drawer full of birthday cards. I put my hand on her back and felt the shape of her spine, the ladder she used to climb out of this. We moved into a place above the public library on Bull Street, where the windows were honest and the floorboards didn't mind speaking when you crossed them. The living room was small enough to dust in 10 minutes. The kitchen had an old electric cooktop with a coil that burned too hot on one side, and I loved it immediately. We brought what mattered: her kettle, my cast iron, family photos in a shoebox that had held church shoes, the recipe cards in my husband's hand. I put the card with Mr. Pierce's number in a drawer and closed it like a door I could open again, and decided not to. People said the town was divided, which is what you call a thing when you want it to sound temporary. People also said that they never thought, which is always a lie people tell themselves to sleep. I went to the farmer's market under the overpass and brought corn from a man who smiled with his eyes. I learned my neighbor's dog's name before I learned my neighbor's. I walked to the library and checked out a book I'd always meant to read, and then another one, and then one that was probably for teenagers, but made me feel less like I had to earn laughter. On a Tuesday in September, a letter came from Dr. Klein on county letterhead that looked like it had been designed by a committee that wanted to appear competent. It said, "Case referred to state attorney for criminal review. Recommendations for oversight changes attached." It also said in handwriting at the bottom, "Tell Mr. Pierce he can take a nap now." That night, I made mac and cheese on a coil that burned too hot and let the edges brown. Marin stood at the window and watched the branch of the magnolia move like it was thinking. "Mama," she said, "do you think I was stupid?" "No," I said. "I think you were loved and polite and in rooms with people who count on that combination and call it something else." She nodded like that hurt and helped. "I'm filing for a postponement on the wedding," she said. "Postponement is a polite word. We can pick another one later." "I know," she said. "I need to say it soft first so I can hear it." We ate on the floor because we didn't have a table yet. After, we washed dishes by hand in a sink that drained the way it wanted, not the way we asked. We sat on the couch and watched a show where nothing bad happened, because some nights you have to retrain your eyes. I kept expecting to wake up tasting fear like pennies. Instead, there was a quiet, not the silence of an empty room, but the quiet of a place where your own breath doesn't echo so much it scares you. I didn't want revenge. I wanted the time back we'd spent learning to love people who thought they could write our names without asking. One morning in October, Mr. Pierce called to say he had baked bread and left half a loaf on my doorstep because I had brought him yeast. He said, "I never had children," and then cleared his throat like that was a long hallway. If I had, I would have wanted them to be the kind of person who reads fine print and calls the right number without flinching. "I flinched," I said. "I just didn't stop moving." "That's the whole thing," he said. The town didn't fall apart the way some towns do when you pull a thread. It just rearranged itself around a truth that had been standing in the middle of the room for years. The hospice wing hired new compliance staff. The notary rules were taught in a class with a quiz, which is how you make people look at words longer than they want to. Churches preached about consent from pulpits where the word was pronounced like a prayer, even if it went down like medicine. People who had been quiet started telling stories in grocery lines, and I saw the way one person speaking out loud can make space around a tale that had been living in a throat. I found work part-time at the library downstairs, shelving books and listening to the way people become softer at the edges when they talk about what they love. The children's librarian said I had a tone that made kids stop running without making them feel like they'd broken anything that mattered. I took it as a compliment. One afternoon, I was reshelving a stack of biographies when a woman I didn't know handed me a small envelope. "For you," she said, "from someone who says he doesn't do thank yous, but he is willing to try." Inside was a note from Dr. Klein in handwriting that did not waste curves. It said, "Intake ago, I thought justice looked like courtrooms. This year I learned it can look like a mother with a grocery list and a memory. Thank you for changing my mind." I slid the note into a book of poems where I could find it when I needed to listen to someone else's breath for a while. At Thanksgiving, Marin and I cooked in our small kitchen like we were choreographing a dance. We invited Rosa and her little sister, and Mr. Pierce came with a pumpkin pie that leaned to one side like it wanted to nap. We said grace, and I thanked God for the kind of people who show up to a table with food and the people who show up with forks and empty plates. I did not name enemies or ask for their eyes to fall out, though some prayers I have prayed in my head over the years have had that tone. Later, in the quiet, when the dishes were finally done, Marin asked me if I was angry still. "I am the kind of angry that sets a table," I said, which is to say I'm ready for whoever needs a seat. She laughed. It made the light in the room look warmer. The investigation dragged on like they do when people with good haircuts are in charge of the calendar. There were grand jury whispers and then a whisper of whispers. The paper ran a story with a headline that tried to be brave and settled for polite. The Burtons were photographed entering a building with their lawyers looking at their shoes. Victoria's pen became a symbol in other people's mouths. People sent me grainy news clips by text with captions like, "You were right." I did not respond to most of them. I cooked, I read, I learned the names of the trees outside my window and the ducks that waddled toward anyone with a bag. In December, a knock came at our door. I opened it to find Victoria standing on my landing like she had climbed Mount Modesty and conquered it. She wore a coat that cost more than my car and a look that said she had come for a particular kind of victory. "May I come in?" she asked. "Are you a judge?" I asked. "No," she said. "Then no," I said. She lifted her chin like it was on a string and someone tugged. "You've made an enemy," she said. "I made a decision," I said, "and if you find that enemy shaped, that's not mine to hold." She took a small breath. "You don't know how this town works," she said. "I do," I said. "I've been working in it for 68 years. She looked past me into the living room like she could invent a version where she belonged there. "We could have done this quietly," she said. "Quietly?" I repeated. I said it like it was a menu item, and I was trying to decide if I had the appetite. "You signed my name. You tried to put my child to sleep because it made your day smoother. I don't see a quiet path through that." She took a card out of her purse. It was thick enough to use as a coaster. "If you ever change your mind," she said. I smiled at her the way I smile at mosquitoes when they land on my arm. "About who I am?" I asked. "I won't." I closed the door gently. Behind me, Marin was at the small table writing a list of things we needed, and she looked up the way a person does when the air in a room changes. "Who was it?" she asked. "An old habit," I told it. "There was no place for it to sit." She nodded. "Good," she said. The year turned. The library was busy with people who had decided January was when to be different. Rosa got a promotion she didn't ask permission to want. Mr. Pierce joined a community class on watercolor painting and came to my door one morning with a picture of my window done in shades of blue, like a quiet song. In March, the DA held a press conference that I did not attend. I watched it in the break room with a sandwich in my hand. The charges were not everything I wanted and not nothing. Fraud counts, notary violations, a conspiracy that sounded small when said out loud and felt big when you looked at the stack of papers it took to build it. People like to believe justice is a switch. It's not. It's a dimmer, and some days you get to slide it a notch toward light. Marin filed paperwork in family court. The words on the paper were not the ones we say in kitchens, but they worked just the same. She came home, leaned her head against my shoulder, and said she felt like she had been holding her breath so long she forgot what lungs were for. "Breathe," I said. I meant it like a command and a blessing. She did. It sounded like a person stepping onto a porch after a storm and finding the boards still there. We do not speak of Nate much. He sent 2 letters that had phrases like, "I made mistakes," and "I thought I was helping." Marin read them and put them in the drawer with the recipe cards, not because they were recipes, but because she wanted them where the past lives in our house, in a drawer we can open when we need to remember and close when we need to live. Summer came again, and with it the kind of heat that makes flies slow down. The magnolia brought flowers fat as fists and then let them rot where they fell, as if to say, beauty becomes the earth, whether you like it or not. I walked to the bakery some mornings, bought a loaf, and came home to find Mr. Pierce sitting on our stairs like a boy who had wandered into his own childhood. We drank coffee on the stoop and watched a city be itself, which is better than most shows. People sometimes ask me if I'm proud. The word feels wrong in my mouth, like a borrowed coat. Pride is loud. I am not loud. I am something else. I am a woman who makes pudding and phone calls with the same attention to detail. I am a woman who loves a list. I am a woman who will stand in a hallway and not let the clock lie. Most days, I don't think of Victoria or her pen. On the days I do, I picture it in a drawer somewhere, quiet, waiting for a hand that will use it on a school permission slip or a library card application. And I hope the ink finds a way to be useful. At night, sometimes I lay awake and count the sounds a building makes when it settles. The pop, the sigh, the small scuttle that could be a mouse or a leaf remembering to be noisy. I think about the first time I held Marin, the heavy lightness of her, the way her head fit in the corner of my elbow. I think about how loving a person is not just feeding them and teaching them to cross the street. It's also learning to stand between them and the things they can't see yet because they're looking at their own life and it's bright. I am not a hero. Heroes are people in stories other people tell. I am a mother. We are not always believed when we say stop, or that belongs to me, or my child is not a place you put your plans. But we learn to speak anyway. We learn to hold paper in the light and say, look. We learn to make rooms hear us. When I think of that day in Bay 4, I don't see the bleach or the clock first. I see Rosa's eyes meeting mine without sliding off. I see a man in a small apartment with boxes full of smarter paper. I see Dr. Klein's hand, steady, lifting to vote. I see Marin's face at the window, soft and strong at the same time, like a song you only learn to sing when you're tired of hymns that tell you to wait. If you ask me what changed us, I would say it wasn't the hearing, or the letter, or the pie. It was the moment I took the card out of my wallet and dialed. It was the decision to make my voice a tool instead of a decoration. Today, there is soup on the stove. There is laundry in the basket. There is a library book due tomorrow and a neighbor who needs a ride to the clinic. There is a post-it on the fridge that says yeast because Dr. Klein has figured out sourdough and refuses to be humble about it. There is a window open, just enough to let in the sound of someone's radio down the block. There is the recipe card in the drawer, and the number is still legible. I take it out sometimes and look at it the way you look at a photograph of yourself, where you look braver than you felt. Then I put it back. I don't need it today, but it's there. Like a name you keep even when you get married. Like a poem you learn by heart. Not because you want to recite it, but because you like the way it feels on your tongue when you're alone. People think freedom is a loud thing. Sometimes it is. Sometimes, though, it is the sound of a woman turning the stove off before the milk scalds. It is the quiet smack of a library book closing. It is a key left in a lock because you trust the door to stay closed. I have learned to measure my life in small proofs. A notary date that lines up like a seam, a badge chime that matches the hour, a daughter's breath that runs its own pace, unbothered, bread that rises, ink that dries where it should, a clock at home that still reads 5 minutes slow because the man I loved the longest said it that way, and because sometimes when the world is trying to run you, it is a particular pleasure to be a little bit late and exactly yourself. There are days I rage. I do. The rage is not a bonfire anymore. It is a pilot light. It waits for the moment when it is needed and then offers itself, not to burn the house down, but to heat the water. I use it to make tea and soup and phone calls and boundaries. When Marin graduates, because she will, because a woman who has learned her own voice can study with more attention than a whole room full of boys with the right shoes, I will sit in a folding chair that hurts my back and clap until my hands ache. I will bring a sign that says nothing because I do not like signs. I will wear the blue cardigan because it has never failed me. Maybe someday, long after this is a story that belongs to more people than me, I will run into Victoria in a grocery aisle by the canned beans. She will pretend not to see me. I will pretend that I don't mind. We will both reach for the same can and pause. In that pause, I will think of the paper and the pen and the way some people learn and some people don't. I will let her take the can. I will take another. My soup will be fine. A recipe is a set of instructions, but a life is what you make with what's on the shelf. I am not going to write a book about this. I am not going to stand behind a podium and explain my courage to a room. There are already enough words in the world asking for claps. I am going to keep shelves in order and make lists and stand in rooms when I need to and say my name clear. I'm going to remember that even when someone writes your name on a line that did not belong to them, the name is still yours. That's the part they can't sign. If you are listening to me and you are a person who thinks you have to get louder to be heard, I'm not going to tell you to hush. I will tell you this. Check the date on the stamp. Ask who the call came from. Stand under the small light by the stairwell window where the glare is kinder. Wipe the shine off with a cloth. Look, you don't need permission to notice. You don't need a degree to read. You need a chair you can stand on, a number you can dial, and a way to hold your hand steady even when your knees remind you. If you don't have a chair, I have one you can borrow. If you don't have a number, I will show you where I keep mine. If your knees are loud, I can sit with you. I started this story with bleach. I'd like to end it with bread. The kind Dr. Klein makes that tastes like patience. The kind Mr. Pierce slices like a person who remembers ration books. The kind Marin eats with her eyes half closed because she learned in a hospital to be grateful for anything that tastes like regular. The kind you tear with your fingers and pass down the table. The kind that fills a room with a smell that says, "You're here. You are allowed to be here. You don't have to sign anything to sit down."